In ancient Japan, mastery was never accidental. It was forged through silence, repetition, and an unbreakable bond between spirit and action. The Shokunin did not rush. He did not chase motivation. He did not ask whether he felt ready. He worked. While the world chased recognition, the Shokunin refined the unseen. While others scattered their energy, he narrowed his focus until distraction starved. This story follows a young warrior sent to a mountain workshop, not to fight, but to learn what most never do: how to give oneself fully to a single path. His enemy is not weakness, it is distraction. Every unfinished task, every divided intention, every moment where the mind wanders from the hands. Under the guidance of a master who speaks little and observes everything, the warrior is stripped of urgency, ego, and false ambition. What remains is work, pure, repetitive, demanding. Through craft he confronts fear. Through silence, he discovers presence. Through discipline he transforms. This is not a story about talent, it is about devotion. The Shokunin Katagi is not a technique, it is a way of being. And once learned, it changes not only how you work, but who you become. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, so I can keep bringing you great content. The warrior arrived before dawn, carrying ambition like an unsheathed blade. His body was strong, his eyes sharp, his spirit restless. He believed mastery was earned through intensity, through speed, effort, and visible results. He had come to conquer a craft. He did not yet know he would first be conquered by stillness. The master did not greet him. No lineage was spoken, no rules explained. He simply gestured toward a low wooden table scattered with worn tools, their metal dulled by time. "Clean," the master said. The warrior obeyed, though confusion tightened his jaw. His hands moved quickly, almost aggressively. He scrubbed as if racing an invisible opponent. His mind leapt forward toward progress, recognition, the next stage. Each movement was contaminated by impatience. Though the tools began to shine, the warrior felt no satisfaction. By midday, the master returned and replaced the tools with stones. A range, no pattern, no purpose, no approval. The warrior stacked them carefully, adjusting angles, seeking completion. When finished, the master disrupted the arrangement with his foot and walked away. No criticism, no explanation, only silence. Irritation ignited. Ego stirred. The warrior felt unseen, wasted. That night, alone in his narrow room, he realized something unsettling. His body was not exhausted. His mind was. It resisted simplicity. It craved stimulation. It feared stillness. At dawn, the master removed his sword. "You will not need this." Without the blade, the warrior felt exposed. His identity trembled. Fear whispered, not of danger, but of emptiness. Who was he without visible skill, without action? The master led him into the courtyard and instructed him to stand and observe. Nothing more. Hours passed. Wind brushed bamboo. Shadows crawled across stone. The warrior's thoughts grew loud. Plans, doubts, comparisons, imagined future. He fought boredom, then frustration, then the urge to leave. Slowly, painfully, he began to see the truth. His mind never rested in the present. It lived everywhere except where his body stood. The master finally spoke. "A divided mind creates divided results." The words landed with weight. Modern science echoed the same law. Fragmented attention weakens performance, drains energy, and multiplies error. The brain, when scattered, consumes more effort for less outcome. Ancient wisdom and modern understanding converged in silence. Discipline, the warrior learned, does not begin with force. It begins with presence. Over the following days, tasks remained simple: sweeping, sorting, observing. No variation, no praise. The warrior failed repeatedly, not in action, but in attention. Each mistake revealed impatience. Each distraction exposed fear of insignificance. The master never corrected him. The work itself did. Gradually, something shifted. The warrior's breath slowed. His hands softened. He stopped chasing progress and began inhabiting the moment. The task no longer felt small. It felt heavy with meaning. For the first time, the warrior understood. Mastery does not announce itself. It grows quietly, demanding obedience of the mind before the body can follow. Strength is not born in motion, but in stillness endured without escape. The fractured mind had been revealed, and now it could begin to heal. Morning returned without ceremony. No bells, no commands shouted across stone, only the sound of wood tapping wood. The master stood beside a workbench, holding a single chisel. He placed it in the warrior's hands as one might place a burden rather than a gift. "One task," he said, "every day." The task was simple to the point of insult: shaping a plain wooden block. No ornament, no variation. The same angle, the same depth, the same motion. When the warrior looked up seeking clarification, The master had already turned away. At first the warrior laughed inwardly. This was not training. This was stagnation. His hands obeyed, but his mind rebelled. He thought of better techniques, faster ways, improvements that could be made. He imagined results instead of committing to the cut in front of him. The chisel slipped, the edge dulled, the block cracked. By the third day, boredom arrived like a sickness. The warrior felt trapped inside repetition. His instincts screamed for variety, for challenge, for progress that could be measured and admired. He began to rush, convincing himself that speed was efficiency. The mistakes multiplied. When the master inspected the work, he said nothing. He replaced the block with a new one. Again, silence became heavy. The warrior noticed something disturbing. The task itself was not difficult. What exhausted him was resistance, the constant urge to escape the moment. Each time his attention wandered, the cut lost precision. Each time he negotiated with himself, the work degraded. This was the lesson the master refused to explain. A single task, repeated without deviation, becomes a mirror. It exposes impatience. It reveals ego. It shows how the mind fragments under the weight of simplicity. The warrior began to understand that distraction was not harmless. It was weakness disguised as intelligence. Modern psychology would call this attentional residue. The mind, partially occupied elsewhere, reducing clarity and performance. The ancient system had no name for it. It simply demanded loyalty to the task. By the seventh day, the warrior's shoulders ached, though the work had not grown heavy. The ache came from resistance, from arguing internally, from longing for something else. That night he nearly quit. At dawn he returned. Something had shifted. Not motivation, acceptance. He no longer rushed. He no longer planned ahead. He placed the chisel, breathed, once, and the sound changed. The movement became quieter, heavier, more deliberate. Time stretched, then vanished. The block was no longer an obstacle. It was an anchor. The master finally spoke. Devotion creates depth. The words cut deeper than the blade. The warrior saw it clearly now. Mastery does not come from doing many things, but from doing one thing without escape. Strength is not multiplied by variety. It is concentrated by commitment. As the days passed, the task remained unchanged, but the warrior did. His posture aligned, his breath steadied, his thoughts slowed, until they no longer interfered. He felt the strange pressure of presence, demanding, unforgiving, exact. There was nowhere to hide. This was Shokunin Katagi, not romance, not inspiration. An ancient system built on undivided attention. One responsibility, one breath, one movement, executed fully. The warrior understood now why most people never master anything. They divide themselves. They negotiate with discomfort. They abandon depth for stimulation. They mistake motion for progress. He no longer. When the master inspected the work again, he nodded once. No praise, no approval, only progression. The warrior bowed, not to the master but to the task, for it had begun to teach him how to stand still inside effort, and heavier trials were already waiting. The warrior woke, before the mountain stirred. No urgency pulled him from sleep. No excitement waited ahead. Only the certainty of work. That was new. In the early days, he had risen driven by ambition or frustration. Now he rose because the body moved when it was time. The task had not changed. The rhythm had. The master watched this quietly. On the 10th morning, the warrior's hands felt heavy. His mind felt empty. Not calm, not inspired, simply neutral. He waited for something to ignite inside him. It did not. The silence remained. The wood remained. The chisel remained. He hesitated. The master spoke, his voice low and exact. Do not wait for desire. Desire is unreliable. The warrior stiffened. He had always believed passion was the fuel of mastery, that without feeling, action was hollow. Yet here he was, feeling nothing, and still expected to work. So he did. The cut was imperfect. Then another. His movements were slower, less confident. A quiet frustration rose. Not anger, dull resistance. The kind that whispers, "This is pointless." That whisper was laziness wearing a refined mask. The master explained nothing. He only removed the finished block and replaced it with another. The message was clear. The work does not care how you feel. Days passed. Some mornings the warrior felt strong, others hollow. Sometimes his thoughts were sharp, other times clouded. None of it mattered. The task arrived unchanged, indifferent to his inner weather. Slowly, painfully, a realization settled in. Emotion had been his master for years. When inspired, he acted. When bored, he delayed. When uncertain, he retreated. He had mistaken feeling for authority. This was the heart of the ancient system. Discipline, is not an emotional state, it is a structure. The master finally spoke again, this time longer. Emotion is a visitor, structure is a home. If you build your life on visitors, you will always be waiting. The warrior absorbed this in silence. Modern science would agree. Motivation fluctuates. Dopamine spikes fade. Habits, however, rewire neural pathways through repetition. Action precedes belief. Consistency shapes identity. The ancients did not need scans to know this. They observed it. The warrior stopped waiting for the right mood. He stopped asking whether the work mattered. He simply began when it was time. At first this felt mechanical, soulless, even, but something unexpected happened. Resistance weakened. When emotion was no longer consulted, it lost its power to obstruct. The body moved. The hands worked. Presence arrived not as inspiration, but as stability. Flow emerged quietly, not the ecstatic kind praised in stories, but a grounded absorption. Thought reduced. Action simplified. Each cut carried weight. Each breath aligned with movement. The warrior noticed that when he worked this way, fatigue changed. It no longer drained him. It settled him. The mind grew quieter. After effort, not louder. He understood now why the master had stripped away praise and variation. Inspiration creates dependence. Discipline creates freedom. One afternoon, the warrior failed badly. The wood split. The angle collapsed. Old frustration surged. He looked up, expecting correction. The master did not look at the block. Again he said, "No judgment, no analysis, only continuity." In that moment, something hardened inside the warrior. Not cruelty, but resolve. He saw that mastery does not demand perfection, it demands return. Again and again, without drama. This was the death of negotiation. By the end of the week, the warrior no longer identified with his emotions. He experienced them, but they did not govern him. He acted when tired. He worked when uninspired. He rested when rest was required, not when avoidance whispered. Discipline had moved from an external demand to an internal law. The master observed the change in posture, in breath, in the way the warrior approached the workbench. Not eager, not reluctant, simply present. This is strength, the master said, when action does not depend on desire. The warrior bowed. He understood now. Inspiration is a luxury, discipline is a weapon, and silence was about to sharpen it further. The silence did not begin suddenly. It arrived the way night does, without announcement. One morning, the master simply stopped speaking. No greeting, no instruction, no correction. The warrior noticed immediately. At first he assumed it was a test that would last an hour, maybe a day, but the sun rose and fell, and the silence remained. Meals were eaten without words. Tasks were assigned with gestures. Mistakes were met with stillness. The absence of sound was heavy. Without voice to lean on, the warrior's mind grew loud. Thoughts multiplied. Doubt crept in. Am I doing this correctly? Is this what he wants? Am I wasting time? Silence exposed what discipline had begun to weaken. Fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of wasting effort. Fear of acting without approval. The master watched from a distance, unmoving, his presence calm as stone. He offered no rescue. This was intentional. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is pressure. Under pressure, weak intentions fracture. The warrior's hands trembled slightly during work. His movements became cautious. He overcorrected, hesitated, paused mid-action. Without guidance, the ego searched desperately for certainty. Days passed. Something began to change. Without words to chase, the warrior started observing more closely. The sound of wood under steel, the resistance of grain, the way breath affected steadiness. Small details, once invisible, became loud. Silence sharpened perception. The master had removed explanation so the warrior could develop internal authority. No teacher would always be present. No voice would always guide him. A warrior who needs instruction cannot endure chaos. One evening, the warrior failed again. A joint slipped. The alignment faltered. He froze, waiting. Nothing. No reaction. No judgment. Only silence. And in that stillness, he made a decision. He corrected it himself. Not perfectly, but deliberately. That moment mattered. The mind began to quiet, not because thoughts vanished, but because they were no longer obeyed. The warrior stopped rehearsing outcomes. He focused on what was in front of him. One movement, one breath, one correction. Silence forced presence. Modern psychology calls this attentional narrowing. Under reduced stimulus, the brain conserves energy by focusing deeply. The ancients called it awareness. By the fifth day, impatience weakened. The craving for reassurance faded. The warrior no longer looked toward the master after each task. His posture changed.
grounded, deliberate, self-contained. He was no longer performing, he was practicing. The master finally broke the silence at dawn. Noise hides weakness, he said. Silence reveals it. The warrior bowed, understanding fully. Laziness cannot survive silence. Neither can false confidence. Silence removes distraction, justification, and performance. What remains is truth. Either action continues, or it collapses. The warrior continued. Work became slower, but deeper. Fewer movements, less waste. Every action carried intention. He noticed that when he spoke internally less, he tired less. When he observed more, he erred less. Silence had refined him. The master watched him complete a task, without hesitation, without checking for approval, without emotion. That was the signal. Silence had done its work. The next lesson would not test patience. It would test endurance. That was the lesson. After silence sharpened the warrior's spirit, he expected something new, harder trials, complex techniques, hidden knowledge. Instead, the same tasks returned, the same tools, the same hours, the same routine, day after day. At first disappointment surfaced. The ego whispered that he was ready for more, that repetition was beneath him now. But the master did not respond to potential. He responded only to action, consistency. The master finally said, "Is where most warriors disappear." The warrior soon understood why. Intensity is easy. Anyone can suffer for a moment. Anyone can push when emotion is high. But to return every day without excitement, without praise, without visible progress, that is where discipline is proven. Rain came, cold settled into the mountains, fatigue accumulated quietly. Still, the work remained. The warrior noticed how laziness changed its strategy. It no longer screamed, it whispered, "You worked yesterday. You've earned rest. Missing one day won't matter." Ruthless consistency required refusing these negotiations. The master explained nothing. He simply showed up every morning, every evening, already working. His movements were calm, unhurried, exact, no urgency, no resistance. The warrior realized something unsettling. The master was not disciplined because he was strong. He was strong because he was disciplined. Modern science mirrors this truth. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition, not intensity. Identity forms through behavior repeated over time. The ancients knew this without scanners or studies. The system was simple. That is why it worked. Weeks passed. The warrior stopped counting days. He stopped measuring progress. He stopped expecting reward. Action became automatic. The body moved before the mind questioned. The mind obeyed before emotion interfered. Discipline had shifted location. It was no longer external. It lived inside. He noticed fewer internal arguments, fewer delays, less friction between intention and action. Tasks began on time, ended cleanly. No drama. Ego dissolved quietly. Ruthless consistency stripped away the desire to feel special. There was no spotlight here, only accumulation. Small, precise acts stacking invisibly. One evening, the warrior missed a movement, barely noticeable. He corrected it immediately, and continued. The master nodded once. That nod mattered more than praise. It confirmed something essential. Mastery is boring from the outside. Its beauty is internal. The warrior began to see how this principle extended beyond the workshop. Consistency in thought, consistency in posture, consistency in response to difficulty. Emotion became irrelevant, whether he felt strong or weak, motivated or dull. The work continued. That was freedom from mood, freedom from hesitation, freedom from self-negotiation. Ruthless consistency created a warrior who could not be disrupted by circumstance. The master spoke again. Near the end of the season, talent fades, strength fades, strength fades, even knowledge fades, he said. But consistency compounds. The warrior bowed deeply. He understood now. This was not about craft alone. This was about life, about becoming someone whose actions could be trusted by others, and by himself. When consistency is ruthless, discipline becomes identity. The next lesson would remove structure entirely, and reveal whether the discipline was real. The departure came without announcement. One morning, the master did not assign work. He did not correct posture. He did not speak. He simply handed the warrior his tools, wrapped in cloth worn thin by years of use. "You may go," he said. No ceremony, no final instruction, no blessing. The mountain was quiet. For a moment, the warrior felt unsettled. Structure had been removed. The walls that shaped his discipline were gone. The schedule, the silence, the repetition, all left behind in a single breath. This was the final test. True discipline is not proven under supervision. It is revealed in freedom. As the warrior descended the path, the world felt louder. Voices returned, choices multiplied, distraction waited everywhere. Subtle and patient, the ancient system had not prepared him to escape difficulty. It had prepared him to remain present within it. In the village below, life moved quickly. People rushed, hands were busy, minds scattered. Many worked hard, yet nothing felt precise. Effort was everywhere, presence was not. The warrior noticed this immediately. He took simple work, repairing tools, shaping wood, assisting craftsmen older than himself. He did not speak of the mountain. He did not explain his discipline. He worked one task at a time, one movement at a time, one breath at a time. Others noticed, not because he was fast, not because he demanded attention, but because his actions were undivided. Distraction could not enter his posture. Ego could not interrupt his rhythm. He treated each task as if it mattered, because it did. The master's final lesson became clear. Shokunin Katagi is not about location. It is a way of being. The warrior no longer needed silence to focus. He carried silence inside. Noise passed through him without pulling his attention apart. Fear arose, but it did not command him. Ego whispered, but it was no longer obeyed. Modern psychology would call this internalized discipline. The ancients called it mastery of spirit. The warrior understood now. The path does not end, it deepens. There is no final arrival, only refinement. Each day, he chose the work again, not because he was forced, not because he was inspired, but because commitment had replaced emotion. That was unbreakable strength. Strength that does not shout, strength that does not rush, strength that does not depend on circumstance. Years passed, the warrior aged, his body changed, but his discipline did not erode. Presence remained sharp, attention remained loyal, silence remained available at any moment. Those who watched him work sensed something ancient in his movements, a calm authority, a refusal to waste effort, a quiet dignity, untouched by chaos. He had become what the master intended all along, not a perfect craftsman, but a craftsman of self. One evening, as he closed his tools, the warrior remembered the first day on the mountain, his impatience, his hunger for recognition, his divided mind. He smiled softly. The ego that once drove him had been shaped, not destroyed. Fear had been faced, not avoided. Discipline had become a companion, not a burden. The path continued, not upward, not outward, inward, and it would never end. True mastery is not built through talent or intensity, but through undistracted devotion. Discipline, silence, and presence forge the unbreakable Shokunin spirit.